Well, hello there. Here we are, live from our house to yours. Friday, October 1st, 8 p.m.
May 1st.
Oh, yeah. What did I say October 1st for?
Either you're way behind
we're off
or
to a
way
flying
ahead.
we're off to a flying start. Well, anyway, Friday, May the 1st. And what a beautiful day it is. I think this is maybe the best day of the spring so far here in Southern Ontario. And so if you're coming on here to join us, we thank you because I know it's such a nice evening and people want to be outside because many have been cooped up in their houses. And so if you're taking the time out of your schedule to come and to join us on here, we are very delighted and so happy to have you with us. And when you come on, feel free to say hello and leave a comment in the chat bar and let us know you're watching. I was thinking about the times that we're in with these unusual times around us in the world, and everything is feels like it's being turned upside down in a lot of ways. And I said to someone recently, imagine if we were having this same kind of worldwide lockdown 30 years ago or 40 years ago, or maybe even only 20 years ago, when we didn't have the technology that we have now with our cell phones and our computers and the internet, and how different that this would be in that kind of a time. And so I'm one who likes to think optimistically in every situation, and so I'm very thankful that this is happening in this time and not the many years ago. And so I was pondering that in light of today. My brother-in-law Ron Jones, who sends me various little thoughtful, funny things, he sent this this comment, this statement that went like this. The optimist says the glass is half full. The pessimist says the glass is half empty. And the engineer says that the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. And I thought, well, that is interesting. There are those three different perspectives, but I want to share with you tonight a fourth perspective in light of what we have going on in the world around us. And the fourth perspective is that as a follower of Jesus, we're not concerned about how much water is in the cup because we know the source of the water. We're connected to that source. And so whether the glass is half full or whether it's completely full or it's half empty or almost completely empty, it doesn't really matter. As a follower of Jesus, we know the source of the water, and so our faith and our hope is in him, and we can be encouraged in that. So I just wanted to encourage you today with a little thought on that. And so welcome to each one of you that have joined us. We're just so happy to have you with us for this healthy habits of the heart. And you can see Angie's done up this nice little slide here behind me. And so this whole series, this theme of healthy habits, started for Angie and I about a year ago when we got this idea that we should host a series of dinners at a local restaurant and invite people to come, and I would be giving a talk about healthy habits. Well, there was quite an interest as we send out some invitations for people to come and join us. And so we were so grateful for the responses and people's interest. And so we over the last year have held 4 different events. 3 of them were dinners and one of them was a breakfast. And today we were actually scheduled to hold the 5th event. And so because of the technology of our day and the time in which we live, where all the restaurants are shut down, we decided that we're going to do it this way tonight, where we can do it from our house to yours, from our phone to yours, or however you want to think of it. And so I'm going to share with you another talk in the series of healthy habits of the heart. And so just wanted to talk a wee bit about habits. What are habits? Well, habits are recurrent patterns of behavior, often unconscious, that are acquired through frequent repetition. And so it's something that you and I do frequently, and we do it often without even thinking about it. And it's because it just has become part of who we are, and we've done it so often. And so Habits, can be thought of in various different ways. It could be thought of in terms of our sleeping habits, our eating habits, our exercise habits, the way that we talk, the way that we think. And so we've kind of talked about it, healthy habits of the heart. The heart being not so much, we're not referring to the physical heart, although it's good to have healthy habits that benefit our physical heart. But it's healthy habits that benefit the core of who we are. They flow out when we talk about the heart of the matter. It's sort of the center of our being, and it's things that flow out of the very core of who we are. And so we want to develop good habits in the way that we respond to situations, in the way that we relate. And that's the kind of things that we've been talking about in this series. And so far in the series, we've talked about 3 different things. We've talked about, and Angie, you want to give me the next slide?
Oh, yes, of course.
I have to cue my prompter up here. This is unusual because we've been doing these Facebook Lives on Sunday morning and we're both on the screen, but tonight I'm flying solo on this side of the camera and Angie's on the other side. She's kind of monitoring what's happening there. And so again, we just want to encourage you as you come on, say hello, and throughout the time that we're together, feel free to say your comments, things that you're liking, maybe something you're not liking, maybe a question that you would have, and we'll try to interact with that either live or maybe afterwards off of the air as well. We can respond, but we just want to encourage you to chat it up there in the chat bar. And so these are the 3 habits that we've talked about. We did a dinner where we talked about humility, and one where we talked about honesty, and then we did honors part 1 and part 2. And so tonight we got a new subject, and I'm going to unveil it to you shortly. And I've decided that as I was preparing for this, that this is going to be part 1 because there's just way too much. If I was going to share everything that I wanted to share with you tonight, I would keep you way too long, and I want to honor your time. And so normally in the restaurant, Angie says you get 20 minutes, but tonight she's been gracious and she thought maybe I could have 30. Maybe because we're not at the restaurant, I don't know, but hopefully, and she's controlling the camera so she could cut me off, so I better stick with that. And the other thing is, and I don't know if Phyllis is watching, but we know
Phyllis is here.
Phyllis is here, and I know Phyllis needs to get to bed because she has to go to work tomorrow morning, and so we want to honor her time and not keep her up too late. So what are we going to, well, I wanted to share a verse from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20. It says this: "My son, pay attention to my words. Listen closely to what I say. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and health to to a person's whole body." And these are the words of Solomon. Solomon is widely known as the wisest man that ever lived. And the book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom. And if you need some wisdom, I encourage you to check out what Proverbs says. And so he's saying to his son, listen closely, carefully pay attention to what I say. Keep these words within your heart. Don't let them out of your sight, for they are life to those who find him and health to a person's whole body. And I was like, wow, these words of wisdom actually are going to bring health to our bodies. And so then he goes on in the next verse, I think it's verse 23 of Proverbs chapter 4. He says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for from it flow all the issues of life." And I'm just like, wow, that's what we're talking about. Healthy habits of the heart. We want to guard our heart. We want our heart to be solid and to function well, because everything that we do flows out of that heart. And so that is kind of the scriptural foundation for what we're talking about in this series. And I just wanted to share that with you here tonight. So I am going to share a story. And this is a story that is rather personal. And so it may even be shocking to you that I'm going to talk about this, but there is a point to it. And so please do not disconnect. And because this is all going to make sense if you stick with me on it. Okay. So last year, I had started having a problem physically, and it started one day on a bus. And it led to what I would call the worst 5 hours of my life on a bus. Now, one of the problems or the issues that we as bus drivers face is that we don't always have good access to bathrooms. And so we've all, learned how to sort of adjust the fluid intake with the fluid that's going out, and when we're going to be able to do that, and so on and so forth. And so I've kind of developed a sort of a good routine with that over the years. Well, one day last year, I was heading from Conestoga Mall to Conestoga College, and partway there, I felt this really strong urge to go pee. And I was like, well, it's not completely unusual. That's happened before. So I managed to get to the college, which is about a little over an hour trip. And when I got there, I went to go to the bathroom, and I went pee, and I did not pee very much, according to the urge that I was having. But nonetheless, the urge subsided, and I went back to my bus and headed on the hour trip back the other way to the north end of the city. And within 10 or 15 minutes, it was like, oh my word, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I had to go so bad again. Well, I managed to go, and this sort of went on for this 5 hours. And looking back, it's like I probably should have just called and said I cannot keep driving, but I'm a determined guy. Sometimes that's to my benefit, and maybe sometimes it's not. But at the end of my shift, I thought, I have my bike that I need to ride home, and I was like, well, maybe sitting on my bike will feel better. Well, that was really a mistake. It did not feel any better. In fact, it felt way worse. But I got home, called the doctor, went to see my family doctor later that day. They thought, well, maybe there could be an infection, so they prescribed me some antibiotics. They weren't really sure that was the problem, but it was a possibility. So over the next 24 hours, things seemed to get a little bit better, but not great. Well, 24 hours later, it came back even worse than those 5 hours in the bus. And I spent a horrible evening at home, night at home here. And a few hours later, Angie and I went to emerge. And I was suffering from severe bladder retention, I guess we could call it. And so, thankfully, Emerge wasn't busy, and I won't go into all the details, just to say that I needed a catheter. And the idea of a catheter had always kind of made me go, ugh, But at that moment, I was in such pain and such discomfort. It was just a horrible feeling. I was like, just give me that thing. And what an incredible relief. As soon as they put the catheter in, my bladder started draining, and oh, what a wonderful feeling. And so that led over a process that took place over the next several weeks, where they were trying to figure out what was going on, and the catheter was my friend for a couple weeks, and these were my friends as well. The day bag, the night bag, they were things that became part of my life for a couple weeks, and so just to say, I was diagnosed that I had an enlarged prostate. And so basically the prostate was pinching off the urinary tract and keeping urine from flowing out when my bladder was full. And that is a serious problem. This left unchecked, if this ever happens to me again, I will not wait so long to go to the hospital, because this can cause serious damage to your insides, and in worst case scenario, actually death, if your bladder was to burst. And so, why am I telling you this story? Well, this story has a point, because as you know, if you've listened to Angie and I talk, and you've read any of my books, you know that we like to take everyday stories and apply some life principle or some learning from it. And so there is some good lessons that we want to talk about in this. And so as I was going through this, because we're always thinking about the things that we go through, what can we learn from it? I was thinking about that as I'm going through this time of having the catheter, and nothing was really coming to me. So then I went back to work, and I remember in some of the first days back at work, there was one day I was having a conversation, and this happened on 2 occasions on the same day. And I'm talking with somebody, and the conversation went to, and it was either someone's name or a certain subject that came up. And in the midst of the conversation, when that was mentioned, all of a sudden I could literally see their face change. And it wasn't in a good way. And you could see it on their face that something was irritating them about that person or that subject. And something in that moment rose up within me, and I didn't speak it out loud because I didn't want to explain it right at that moment, but it rose up within me, and the phrase was, too much retention. And that's what I was experiencing when I went to the hospital. Too much retention. And there's this thing that happens in you and I in life. You know, we go through situations, we go through experiences, we relate with people, and in the midst of it, you know, stuff happens that isn't very nice. You know, people say things about us. Maybe they wound us with their words or their actions. Maybe we are suffering from, or we've had some disappointments in life that we just can't get past. It could be a whole variety of things, but it's sort of like, let's just look, for example, at how urine is formed in a practical way. We drink water or coffee or whatever, pop, whatever liquid we're drinking. It comes into our body, and this is a really simple explanation. So if you're really into biology and you can explain this way better than me, please forgive me, but it's just trying to give the basic understanding. And so the liquids come into our body, the stuff that we drink, and then you know, it goes into the bloodstream. The blood is filtered through the kidneys, and the kidneys filter out the impurities, and out of that the urine is formed. And the urine that we let go from our body is over 95% just water, and then a mixture of the stuff that the kidneys filter out. And so liken that to the things that happen in our life. There's this process that happens within us when something it happens to us. Somebody does us wrong, or somebody speaks something against us, or we don't get our way in a situation, and things don't turn out as we had hoped. And there's this processing that happens with these life events in us. And in the midst of it, there's things that I like to think that we can learn something from everything that we experience. And so that's sort of the processing. And then the things that need to be let go of should just be released from our body. Okay, you get the analogy? But sometimes, just as in my experience with my bladder that was extremely full but could not be released because of what my urologist calls the big old prostate. It's like, sorry if that grosses you out, but it's helpful for the description. So just as there's that blocked my urinary tract in the natural realm, I want to suggest to you there are things that block the flow, the releasing from us in a way that keep us from functioning. So what is the healthy habit we want to talk about tonight? The healthy habit is holding. You're going to bring that up? Holding and releasing. Let it go and let it flow. You got that? Because there's this holding that happens when things happen to us. There is a process of things. It's the holding. But we're not meant to hold on to it forever. We're meant to release it and let it go and let it flow. So what is it that blocks that flow in our lives, that keeps us from having those things flow out of us, that if we keep them, they're going to harm us and cause us damage? Well, there's several things, and tonight we're just going to focus on kind of one theme. And the theme is bitterness and resentment. Now, what are these things? And how do they come? Well, you know, we get it. We have times when people offend us, when people do wrong to us, people hurt us, and it hurts, and it just is difficult to deal with, and it's difficult to process. But how are we going to hold that? Many times we hold it with bitterness. We hold it with resentment, and we start to feel anger towards that person, and we can't let it go, and it just is going around in our heads over and over again, and it begins to take root within us. There's this verse in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 that says this. It says, "Be careful lest a bitter root spring up and cause trouble, and by doing so will defile many." I want to suggest to you that bitterness is a poison. And when we hold on to it in any form, it is going to bring ruin and destruction in our life. It will not promote good health in any way, spiritually, emotionally, or physical, in your life or in mine. And it's a poison that demands an audience. Have you ever noticed with someone who's really bitter that they just want to tell other people about their bitterness because they want other people to take it on themselves, and they want people to agree with them. Oh yeah, you were wrong. That was really bad. You should feel bitter towards that person. And so bitterness and resentment are like that big old prostate that I was dealing with that was restricting the flow of what needed to leave my body. When it is happening in our lives, bitterness and resentment, we will not be able to release that which we are meant to let go of. And how do we release that? Well, let me just say a couple other phrases that we sometimes hear as it relates to bitterness and resentment. Have you ever said this about yourself or heard somebody say this? I'm holding a grudge. Like, stop, think about what you just said. I'm holding a grudge. That means I am retaining something in me that is a source of bitterness and resentment towards someone else. Have you ever said this phrase? I take offense to that. And I was like, wow, almost 30 years ago, I heard a sermon that really changed my life on that phrase. And the fellow was preaching and he talked about how it is an actual sin to take offense. We get offended all the time. People do things to us that offend us. But you and I have a choice. The offense, taking offense, that is a choice that we have. And it's literally like the bait of a trap set before us. And if we take the bait, we are now entrapped in that bitterness and resentment. And so we want to let go of that offense. We want to just release it. Because when we hold on to that, it's keeping the flow from happening. We can release stuff, but if we don't let go of the bitterness and resentment, there will be no flow. There will be no flow. So we want to hold, holding and releasing, let it go and let it flow. And so I just wanted to share a few other thoughts around this. So one of the things that has really helped me in understanding this whole area of bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness, because how do we get free from that? Well, it's by choosing to forgive someone, choosing to let them off the hook. And somehow we believe the lie when we are holding unforgiveness in our hearts towards someone. We believe the lie that we are hurting them. And you know what? We're not hurting them at all. We're only hurting ourselves. And when I heard it put this way, it really helped me. When I hold unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment towards someone else, it's like I'm giving them free rent in my head. It's like they're not paying to be there, but I can't let it go because it's there. And it may be not there all the time, but every once in a while it creeps up. And then it's like that conversation I was having with someone where all of a sudden their face changed. And I was like, too much retention. And may we recognize that in our own hearts and in the people we relate with, that we can help call people into this place of freedom where there's a releasing that happens and we can let it go and let it flow. Too much retention, TMR. Sometimes we say the phrase TMI. Well, this is a new one. TMR, too much retention. We want to let it go and let it flow. There's this verse in Colossians chapter 3, starting in verse 12, where Paul is writing and he says about God's chosen and holy people. You are God's chosen and holy people, dearly loved. Then he says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And I like to think of that as our uniform. I get up every morning, I go to work, and I put on a uniform. Well, this is the uniform that you and I are to put on as followers of Jesus. Compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Awesome things to wear as a uniform. Then he says, bear with one another. And that gives you the indication that there's sometimes in our relations that there's going to be some difficulties, some things that we're going to have to put up with. He says, forgive each other just as Christ Jesus forgave you. How did Christ forgive us? Well, we just recently went through Easter where we remembered the crucifixion. And there you have Jesus hanging on the cross. And he is saying one of the things that it's well remembered that he says while he's hanging there on the cross. Jesus, the person who had never committed a sin, is being punished. And what does he say? He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus has forgiven us when we come to him, and we are to forgive others as he has forgiven us. You know, in the Lord's Prayer, we say one of the things we say is, give us our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. So in other words, when we pray that, we are saying, if I don't forgive others, you don't have to forgive me. And I remember I was talking with a fellow one time who had grown up in the church, and he was sharing some difficulties within his family who were all claiming to be Christian, but there was bitterness and not talking to each other and whatnot. And I said, do you know that it says this in the Lord's Prayer? Forgive me my trespasses as I forgive others who have trespassed against me. He was like, really? You know, we say that, many of us can just recite that because we've said it growing up in school. But do you know what it says? It means that and this forgiveness thing, it's not optional. It is a command of Scripture that we are to forgive others who have done us wrong. And people, it is the place of freedom. It is the place where you and I, when we function in it, we can truly release things. We can let it go and let it flow. And we can let go of the things that are causing too much retention in our hearts. I remember a time specifically a number of years ago where I was having this conflict with this person, and it was just really on my mind, and it was causing me lack of sleep and whatnot, and it was just really distressing. And over the process of time, you know, the relationship changed, and we didn't have to relate in the same way anymore, but it still was there. Every time I saw that person, I was like, oh, gotta watch out there, or like there was just this check in me, and I was trying to walk, because forgiveness starts with the decision. It's not a feeling. The feelings may come along later. And so we want to forgive people based, and we want to start with the decision. So I was doing that. I'm like, Jesus, I choose to forgive so and so. And I do say that over and over again. And I still remember it took this, because forgiveness isn't instant. It starts with a decision, and it's a process of it working out in our lives. And I still remember the day when I realized I walked into the room and this person was there, and there was nothing. And then later I was like, hey, there was no reaction in me. There was nothing tugging. I was like, I'm free. And the words of the song, one of the worship songs that Chris Tomlin sings is, my heart is free, no chains on me. And that's what can happen to us when we forgive. Our hearts can be free, no chains on us. And the process of releasing, letting it go and letting it flow can bring such freedom into your heart and into mine. And so I'm so excited to share this with you tonight, because this whole thing that I'm talking about today of releasing things and letting them go so we don't have too much retention, it has literally transformed my life. I want to live in a place of freedom each and every day where I don't hold on to anything from the past, any wrong that has been done to me, any word that has been spoken against me. You know, there was a time a little while ago where I was on lunch at work, and there was two guys that had kind of given me some little jabs, kind of that were, I felt like were below the belt, and they really got under my skin. So I went out to my bus and I was mad. Maybe you've had this same thing happen to you, and I'm driving my bus and I'm just like, oh, I'm going to say this to them and I'm going to say that to them, and how dare, on and on. Well, about an hour into driving my bus, the supervisor comes on the radio, and he says, there's a certain bus on Route 7, which I was driving, that's leaving a trail of coolant wherever they're going. Can you check your buses? And so, sure enough, I turn a corner and I can see in my mirror there's a mark on the pavement behind me, and I pull over, and sure enough, my bus is the one that had blown, the coolant system had blown a leak, the hose or whatever it was, and there was coolant everywhere. And I was like, that was a physical picture of what was happening inside of me. The pressure was building, and if I didn't deal with that, I was going to burst. I was going to blow. And people, that is why this is so important. This is your road to freedom. It's releasing things. It's offering forgiveness. It's letting go of the bitterness and resentment that holds us down. It's letting go of that thing that is building up within us and where I'm crying out, too much retention. We need to let things go. There's a healthy holding and then there's a releasing, so we can let it go and let it flow. Well, this time we're at 31 minutes here, and we have gone on long enough here for tonight, but there's so much more to say. We're going to do another one of these again in the near future. We'll let you know through various means of communication when that will be, because there's more to be shared on this subject of releasing things so that we can let it go and let it flow. But I just want to encourage you tonight with that word, that if there's something that's stirring in you, if there's something that the Spirit of God is kind of bringing back to your mind, then pay attention to that and go to Him and talk to Him about it. You know, we can be real with Him, with God our Father, because He knows our hearts anyway. You can let Him know how you're feeling in the struggle, but forgiveness and releasing the bitterness and the resentment begins with the decision, and that decision can be today for you if you're feeling there's some things that you need to deal with. So I want to encourage you to do that. This is Healthy Habit of the Heart that will transform you as you release things and you let it go and let it flow. Well, that's all we're going to do for tonight on this subject. I am just like bursting with more stuff I want to say about this, but we will save that for another time. Again, we thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we just want to pray God's blessing on you as you go into this weekend, and trust that we can function in a healthy way in every area, in the heart, in the core of our being, as we follow Jesus and as we submit our hearts to Him. All right. Well, I think that's all for now then. And as we stay on the oh yes, Angie's reminding me to say join us Sunday if you can. 10 o'clock Sunday morning, we'll be doing another Facebook Live from the same location. And from our house to yours, we'd love to have you join us then as well. So, God bless you all. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend.